I called my son from my hospital bed, and he asked if it could wait until after his wife's birthday. It was 11:12 a.m. on Memorial Day. The sun poured through the hospital window. I remember that light because it hit me right in the eyes, and I couldn't make out Nurse Julia's face when she asked if I wanted another blanket. I nodded, not because I was cold, but because something inside me had just dropped from my chest, quietly, without a sound. The last time I called an ambulance, it was for Gerald. This time it was for me, heart racing, cold sweat, shaking hands. When the paramedic asked my birth year, I said 1956. My mouth answered, but my mind went somewhere else, to the fact that my mother was still alive that year. In the ambulance, the EMT asked if I had any children they should notify. I said, yes, just one. Then I gave them his number. They called, left a message. I stared at the soft green light blinking on the heart monitor. 67 years of life. And when it truly mattered, there was only one number I could dial. At the ER, they laid me down gently. Julia's soft, brown hair, kind eyes, clipped monitors to my chest. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Okay? I nodded. Said nothing. Not because I couldn't, but because I had nothing left worth saying. At noon, Julia brought in a food tray, a cup of orange, Jell-O, watery white porridge with no salt, and a glass of cold water without ice. My name was printed on the tray, but the ink was already fading. I reached for the lid, then let my hand fall away. My phone buzzed. Derek. I waited a beat before answering. Loud music in the background. Glasses clinking. Someone shouted, "Happy birthday!" Lynn, Derek spoke over the noise. "Hey, Mom." "Yes," I said. He laughed tight, distracted. "Is something wrong?" "We're just having a little brunch for Lindsay." "You okay?" I looked up at the stained white ceiling. "I'm at the hospital," I said. There was a pause. Then, wait, what happened? I didn't answer right away. I could hear Lindsay laughing in the background. Someone was singing along with the music. "We're already at brunch, Mom. Is that okay?" I took a quiet breath. "Go take care of Lindsay." He said something else, but I didn't catch it. His voice sounded rushed, like he was trying to tick off a task. Like I was an inconvenience. A wrong moment. On the wall, a calendar hung with tape. One red circle marked Lindsay's day in bold marker. I remembered when Gerald used to do that for me, but with blue ink on a scenic calendar. That ink had long since faded. The last thing Derek said was, "You'll be okay, right? I'll call you after the party." I didn't answer, and I didn't wait for the call either. As the day wore on, I saw Julia scribbling something at the nurse's station. I turned to face the wall. Dinner was more porridge now cold, the Jell-O still untouched. No one came to take the tray. I reached for the blanket and pulled it up to my chest, not because I was cold, but because I needed to hold on to something. No new messages on my phone. I opened Instagram. I don't use it much, but I know where to look. There she was, Lindsay, in a white dress, holding a bouquet. A heart-shaped cake behind her. Warm lights, laughing friends. The caption, all caps best. Birthday ever. Lucky wife. I turned my phone face down. I glanced at the tray. The orange Jell-O had tipped, spilling a bit of juice onto the napkin. That orange reminded me of Lindsay's hair, back when she dyed it ombre. I once told her it looked beautiful. Later, Julia returned and asked if I wanted to see the doctor. I shook my head. "Tomorrow," I said. "Will someone be coming to pick you up?" she asked. "Probably not," I said. "But I can call a cab." She nodded. Didn't ask anything more. I didn't cry, but it felt like I had disappeared from my own family. Even after I returned from the hospital, the house still felt empty, missing a son. I got out of the taxi, paid in cash, and stood at the front door for a few seconds. Not because I was looking for the key, I knew exactly where it was, under the little potted plant by the step, but because part of me still believed I shouldn't have needed it. It was drizzling. The air smelled of damp earth. Wet leaves clung to the soles of my shoes. The taxi pulled away. No one came to open the door. No one waited. I bent down, lifted the pot. The key was still there, the same one Gerald and I had used for 38 years. I slid it into the lock, turned it once. The click sounded dry, unmistakable. Inside, the house felt cold, not from the weather, but from the absence of people. The kitchen was spotless, as if no one had cooked in days. The decorative plates still hung on the wall, but no longer gleamed. I set my bag on the wooden chair. It creaked softly, a sound that made me feel like I was disturbing my own home. I hung up my coat, changed into slippers, and walked straight to the kitchen to boil some water. The old box of Lipton was still there, nearly empty. I reached for Gerald's favorite mug, ivory white rimmed with blue. There was a small crack in the handle. I used to say I'd glue it back, but I never did. While the water boiled, I turned on the radio. NPR, Evening News, a warm, steady male voice. Something about the housing market, home prices, soaring young people, struggling to afford their first house. I didn't think much of it until the words echoed in my empty living room, and I realized this home I stood in might already be part of someone else's plans. Rain kept falling. I sat on the couch, Gerald's couch, empty now. I rested my hand on the armrest, still cool from the morning, and I wondered if Gerald were here, would he have called Derek? The tea grew cold. I didn't drink it. I just sat, staring outside at the puddle spreading in the driveway. A knock at the door startled me. When I opened it, Rose was there, holding a pie tin wrapped in plastic. "I saw the kitchen light," she said. "Didn't think you were home yet." "I got back this morning," I told her. "No one came to pick you up." I shook my head. "No." Rose peered into the house. "I made peach cobbler. Thought I'd bring some over. Folks have been talking." I tilted my head. "Lindsay, your daughter-in-law." I overheard her at the cafe asking a realtor about this house. She spoke like she already knew it. I didn't react, just stepped aside to let her in. Rose sat in her usual spot, the chair by the window. She used to sit there when Gerald was alive. The light was soft in that corner, just enough to show dust if you hadn't cleaned well. Ida brought out 2 small plates, set them on the wooden table. The pie cutter was still in the bottom kitchen drawer. As I sliced, I heard Rose sigh. Kids these days are strange. Can't even let the old folks settle before eyeing the pieces. I didn't respond, just nodded slightly. After she left, I washed the dishes, put them back on the rack. Then I went upstairs. The bedroom was still the same. Blankets folded, pillows aligned, but one drawer on the old wooden dresser was slightly open. I didn't remember leaving it that way. I pulled it out. Inside was a worn envelope, ivory-colored edges frayed. In Gerald's handwriting, blue ink, slanted white, "Helen, open only when you need to." I opened it. Inside was a single sheet folded in thirds. Gerald's handwriting, no mistaking it. "If I go first, don't let anyone move you from this house unless it's your choice. You're the one who holds the last light." I read it twice. My hands didn't shake. But the words landed differently this time. Deeper, more final. I went downstairs, opened the desk drawer. The deed was still there. still in my name. No transfer, no Derek, no Lindsay. I placed it back, closed the drawer gently. No sound. Then I stepped into the living room, sat down on the old armchair, the one Gerald used to rest his hands on every night. I laid mine on the same spot. Not for anyone to see, not needing anyone to know. I used to think I had nothing left, but now I know. Everything that truly matters is still in my hands. Grandma, when Mom said she just needs to stay until the end of the year, what did she mean? I froze. Pancake batter still clung to my fingertip. Emily stood across the kitchen, spoon in hand, not stirring the bowl. Sunlight hit her dark, thick hair, with a few golden strands from the summer sun. I didn't answer right away. The kitchen fell silent, except for the dry, steady tick of the wall clock. What did she mean, Grandma? She asked again, softer now, but not afraid. I wiped my hands on a towel, set the spoon down. I'm not sure I said. She didn't push, but her eyes lingered on me longer than most 12-year-olds would. Not demanding, not letting it go either. That morning, I poured the pancakes into round shapes the way I always did when she visited. They rose evenly browned just right. Emily liked maple syrup and frozen strawberries. I let her top them herself, her hands slow, deliberate, like someone older than her years. We sat at the wooden table beneath the window. The early rain had stopped. The backyard glistened. Sparrows hopped along the wire, grooming their wings. I poured tea for myself, milk for her. Neither of us spoke. Derek video called at 10:42. I answered. Lindsay's face appeared first. Her hair wrapped in a towel, lying under an infrared lamp. In the background, water sounds, muffled voices from a spa. Hi, Mom, Lindsay said quickly, then turned the screen to Derek. You doing okay? I nodded. Derek asked, You and Emily doing something? Pancakes, I said. Good. I'll call back later. Just a bit busy. The call ended after 28 seconds. I stared at the black screen. Emily took her last bite, chewing slowly. I asked, What did your mom say to you before coming here? She shrugged, just said, I'd stay a few days. Not to bother you. I cleared the dishes. Emily helped stack them, still quiet. But I caught her glancing toward the study. That afternoon, I opened the old bookshelf. Emily stood beside me and pulled out a photo frame. It was a picture of Gerald and me, taken in 1988. He wore a blue shirt, his arm around me. I wore a white dress with tiny flowers. We were both smiling, but looking at each other, not the camera. When was this Grandma back? When we were still renting a small apartment downtown, before your dad was born. Emily set the frame down and tilted it to avoid the glare. He kinda smiles, like Dad. I didn't respond. But I saw it then, how she remembered Gerald's eyes, even though they'd never met. That evening, while I was folding towels on the couch, Emily came over holding something small. Mom doesn't know I took this, she said. It was a black USB stick, a folded note taped to it. Grandma should listen to Thursday night. I didn't ask questions. I nodded. That night, after Emily had gone to sleep in the old guest room, I turned on my laptop, plugged it in, one folder, one audio file. I put on headphones. First footsteps, water running from the kitchen sink, then Lindsay's voice, tense, annoyed, as soon as she signs it's done. You said she doesn't really understand, right? Derek answered low. I don't think so. But she's been different lately. Lindsay. Different how? She's always quiet. That's our advantage. A short laugh. Sharp. That house is just step one. Then we roll it all up, buy closer to the city. Emily gets into that charter school. I took off the headphones. No trembling, not even breath. I just sat. Moments later, a soft knock at the door. Emily peeked in. "You listened." I nodded. "You heard the whole thing." She nodded back, eyes fixed on mine. I opened my arms. She stepped in, wrapped herself around me, gently but tightly, like she was holding someone who looked strong but might already be breaking. And as I looked at her, I knew this child, she's the only reason I can't stay silent anymore. I called my son from the hospital. He didn't come. 3 weeks later, I called my lawyer and sold the house he thought he'd inherit. Alan McKinnon's office still smelled of old paper, burnt coffee, and lemon wax on wood. I had been here once before, with Gerald back in 2002, to sign the contract for the new roof. Back when I still believed the biggest decisions in life were the kind you made together. Now I was sitting alone. Alan looked just the same, striped shirt, loose tie, big hands, with a clean, steady signature. He pulled out a chair, set a folder on the glass table, tilted his head. "Helen." Before I read anything, "Are you sure?" I reached into my purse and pulled out an old envelope, Gerald's handwriting. Next to it, the USB Emily had given me, wrapped in a soft gray pouch. "I don't need to say anything," I said. "It's all in here." Alan nodded, didn't press. He knew my silence, the kind that carries sharp edges. He plugged in the USB, scanned a few transcribed lines. When he got to, "Once she signs, it's all ours," he exhaled just barely. I walked to the corner and poured myself a cup from the drip machine. The familiar ticking of hot water, the scent of bitterness. A small American flag peeked out behind a family photo on his desk. A wooden plaque read, "Notary Public." I looked out through the window. Heavy clouds. As if the sky didn't yet know someone was letting go of what they'd held onto for more than half a lifetime. "What's your plan?" he asked. "Sell the house. Put everything into a trust. For Emily. When she's old enough. No access for Derek. No notice to Lindsay. You're certain I'm tired of replying to texts about Sunday dinners." Alan opened his ledger, started writing. We worked for nearly an hour, reviewing the deed insurance, Gerald's original signature. Everything was still intact. He'd left my name as the sole owner, a quiet way of handing me the sword I'd once refused to hold. "Sign here," Alan said. I picked up the pen. No hesitation. My signature landed straight and sure. "Last time I signed, for both of us, was our wedding day," I whispered. Alan didn't answer. Just closed the file, pressed the red seal, and nodded. "It's done." As I stood to leave, Alan rested a hand on the folder. "Are you sure you won't say anything to Derek?" I looked at him. "If I say it out loud, I'll soften." I returned home before dusk. A light drizzle. Cardboard boxes were neatly stacked on the porch. Books, photo frames, tablecloths. Rose stood by the fence, trimming lavender with garden shears. "Packing up?" she asked. "Just rearranging things." She didn't ask more, just held up a pie tin and gave it a little shake. "Made this apple pie this morning. Still warm." I took it. "Thank you." Inside, I unhooked the wedding photo. Gerald in a suit, me in a lace dress. Both of us laughing the kind of laugh only newlyweds are brave enough to show. I wiped the frame with a dry cloth and placed it in the last box. No tears, no trembling. I checked my phone. A new message. "Dinner on Sunday." I stared at it for a moment, then deleted it. He knocked on the door with flowers and a late apology. I didn't answer. Instead, I let the lawyer hand him the envelope, along with a note that said, "I'm not dead, but I no longer need you either." Alan stood at the foot of the steps, holding the thick envelope sealed in red wax. Derek stood behind a bouquet of white lilies, shifting uneasily. Lindsay lingered close in a beige work dress hair, curled neatly, lips just red enough. They both stared at Alan, like he might change his mind, like a middleman could soften the weight of words. But Alan said little. He simply handed over the envelope, turned down the steps, and walked to his car. I stood behind the curtain, didn't move. The house was nearly empty. Only a wooden chair by the window, a box labeled "Books to Keep," and a floor lamp glowing gold. Emily stood by the stairs, her hand on the railing, silent, just watching. Derek tore open the envelope the moment Alan left the gate. His eyes landed on the first line, Gerald's handwriting. From years ago, "If I go first, don't let anyone force you from this home." I saw his hand tighten around the paper, but he didn't rip it. Lindsay snatched it, flipping to the later pages, the sale confirmation, the trust documents, the transcript from the USB recording. She stopped halfway through, her voice sharp. "You created a trust." I stepped out of the shadows, faced them. No need to raise my voice, not for me, for the only person who still looks at me as human. Emily stepped down one stair. She didn't speak, but she stood beside me. Lindsay forced a smile, tight, strained. "You should have talked to us first." I met her gaze. "My son should have come to the hospital." Derek looked like he was about to speak, but Lindsay cut in hard. "You don't think Emily will resent you for this? You're taking her parents away, putting her in the middle." I didn't flinch. I answered slowly, "No, I think she'll learn how to live without bowing to toxic love." Emily leaned in, resting her hand on mine, cold but steady. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind fluttered the curtain. A sparrow perched on the iron railing. Lindsay turned first, yanking Derek's arm. "Let's go." Her eyes were glassy, not from sorrow, but from the bitterness of losing. Derek didn't look at me as he followed, only glanced at Emily, a flicker of something unspoken, but not brave enough to say aloud. When the door shut, I didn't turn. I just exhaled. Emily sat down on the wooden chair, hugging her knees, eyes on the worn spot in the floor Gerald once meant to sand, but never got around to. I turned away, walked into the bedroom, and said quietly, as if to remind myself my son didn't die. He just isn't the man I used to know. I used to think I'd die in that house, beneath our old wedding photo. But in the end, I left while still alive. And for the first time, I felt free. On my first morning in the new place, there were no creaking floorboards, no musty smell from the old carpet, just sunlight soft, like a hand stroking my hair. The kitchen was small, walls painted cream. A wooden clock hung slightly crooked. It ticked on time, but always a beat behind, just like me. I made tea, same kind as always. Lipton yellow packet, no sugar, no milk. The tea table sat by the open window, wide open. The breeze from the valley carried the scent of soil and lavender from the neighbor's garden below. I left the tea untouched. On the bookshelf sat fragments of an old life. Gerald's books, Steinbeck Bradbury, a few still marked with handkerchiefs. I shelved them by feeling, not by order. No one left to correct me anymore. My phone buzzed. It was Rose. "I heard you moved," she said. "Quiet little area. Is Hazel's Corner nearby?" "Gerald used to read the paper there." "I saw the sign yesterday," I said. It read in chalk, "Today's special stillness." Rose chuckled softly. "Fits you." We ended the call after a few warm words. No one mentioned Derek. No need. That afternoon, I received a letter from the school. White envelope, postmarked. Emily had requested a change of residence. Reason, living with Helen. Grandmother, typed in neat font, but my name handwritten in purple ink. Tilted letters. The same tilt I'd taught her when she first learned to write my name on birthday envelopes. I told no one. I simply brewed another pot of tea. Friday evening, a knock at the door. I opened it. Emily stood there, backpack on her shoulders, small suitcase by her feet, clutching a cat-shaped pillow, the one I bought her at the Christmas fair 4 years ago. I didn't ask anything, just stepped aside. She walked in, not like a guest, but like someone coming home. We didn't rearrange much, just moved a few chairs, replaced the tablecloth. Emily opened the windows. I unpacked a lavender pot figurine and placed it on the balcony. We planted together, her hands covered in dirt. I handed her a towel. She didn't take it, just looked at me and smiled. That night, I told her about Gerald's handkerchief, beige, with blue trim, embroidered with a tiny H in the corner. I'd kept it, not for the memories, but because, as I told her, it's the one thing I kept, because it never lied to me. Emily nodded, her hand still clinging to the edge of my shirt. Then she hugged me tight. "Now I have a home," she whispered. "Not because it's a house, but because someone's waiting for me." I didn't answer, just pulled her closer. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I stood in the bathroom mirror, soft light overhead. I brushed my hair, one side still silvering unevenly. Cheeks a little sagged, dark circles under the eyes, but my gaze clear, like it had never fully closed. I looked into the mirror and whispered, "Hello, Helen. It's good to finally meet you again." The day I left the old house, there was no one to see me off and no one I needed to stay. But what I carried with me wasn't furniture or boxes. It was the silence that had turned into resolve. I used to think sacrifice was love, but I've come to understand if you don't stand tall for yourself, even your own family will grow used to looking down on you. Like the old wooden chair that once sat in the living room, holding everyone up for years. And when they could all stand on their own, they forgot it was still there. If you've ever felt yourself fading in your own family, maybe it's time you stood up not to leave, but to become yourself again.